Wake up, America, can't you see the time has come? It seems that you've forgotten God to thank Him for what He's done. He's made you the greatest nation ever to be known to man. Don't forget that you still need Him to guide you with His hand. They say when the pilgrims landed their feet upon your sod, they raised a flag to heaven and said we'll worship God. It seems that He's been with you since the day they made this stand. Don't forget that you still need Him to guide you with His hand. Wake up, America, can't you see the time has come? It seems that you've forgotten God to thank Him for what He's done. He's made you the greatest nation ever to be known to man. Don't forget that you still need Him to guide you with His hand.
Good morning, Presby Nom. It's Presbycast, and we're back. No one sent us video of it happening yet, but what if our episodes were played loudly over speakers, over tented protesters on campuses? I wonder what the effect would be. Would that be the start of a new, pretty good awakening on college campuses? Could we stir them to such great aspirations as that? I don't know. All that's left is for you to try it and report back to us. So, what do you think?
Well, they would need more of those Rubbermaid garbage can sections fashioned into shields, valiantly charging the police lines. Sometimes it feels like that's what we're doing, but we're a little bit more sophisticated than that. So, the music is as bad as it is because, our guest taunted us about the quality of the music, so that just stirs us up. It inflamed us, and here we are. But we are very pleased to be joined by the moderator, maybe the man who's enjoyed being moderator of the PCA General Assembly more than anyone ever has. And I'm not saying he's the best that ever has been, but I think he's enjoyed it more. Is that fair, Pastor Greco?
It certainly is, Brad. As I told people, if you saw me during the assembly, I was having the time of my life. And I may not have been the best, but I will say that currently I am the world record holder for getting us out soonest. I broke Ligon Duncan's record.
Oh, well, there you go. I wasn't there for that one, but that was way back in 2000, early 2000s.
Yeah, it was Pittsburgh.
Okay.
I believe.
Before my time, but very good. Well, you were loud too, right? I mean, you were audible.
That's correct. So I think if Resby wants to play the podcast to protesters, my episode would be appropriate because I think I'm the only person who's ever been accused of being weaponized as I spoke at a General Assembly.
Yes, there was an audible protest about your audio levels at General Assembly, and that was in St. Louis.
I think I drove the man entirely out of the PCA.
Yes, and that was
the sound waves just pushed him back through the exit doors at the back of the hall.
Well, you were just giving a minority report or the Overtures Committee report or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't moderating.
Nope.
Well, it's that time of year. This has sort of been a quiet one. It sort of snuck up upon us, as they say in the South. But inexorably, General Assembly 2024, the 51st, approaches. Last year we had all the fanfare and hoopla with it being the 50th anniversary of the birth of the PCA. And this year, the Assembly's in a slightly different maybe a little out of the way place. I mean, it's on the Eastern Seaboard. It's at Richmond, Virginia, but that's not the first venue we think of when we think of PCAGA. We think of Birmingham, Atlanta, maybe Dallas, but not Richmond, the seat of the Old South. But so, any thoughts on the venue? And I think maybe not as spacious. I mean, plenty big enough for our room, but maybe not as many meeting rooms and that sort of thing. And there was a little drama with hotel rooms the first week. But what about the venue? What do you get to say about that?
Well, I think I have mixed thoughts because, as I have told the genius in the administrative committee office, everyone knows that the best and most reliable person is Angela Nance, and I told her that they should really do a poll, because as far as I was concerned, General Assembly really only needs 3 things. It needs, number 1, a good airport you can get in and out of. Number 2, hotel space. And number 3, restaurants you can walk to. Other than that, I don't care what else there is. I don't need, tourism or anything else like that. So, this is a little bit out of the way, et cetera. But, Brad, there is a benefit to it being in Richmond for me, because that allows me to go a week early and be in Maryland to visit my granddaughter.
Well, that's good. Now, what's her name? We got to give her
Lillian Eve Greco. And so anytime we can spend with Lily is good time. So
well, that's good.
That's a bonus.
You'll be in a good mood when you show up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
is that good or bad for you to show up I guess depending on your perspective, huh?
Well, I think you've done more smiling this year, Fred, than I've seen before. So it's good. You're at a good time of life, and you should enjoy that. So I know in the Southern Baptist Convention, when you're voted the whatever they call it, president of the convention or whatever, there's a lot. It's almost a full-time job. It's not a full-time job being moderator, but it is a year-long job. So tell us what that's been like, and what you've done and what you've learned, because you've had you probably had access and perspective that you may not have had before.
yeah, so the official duties of the moderator after the assembly are very few. So I had a little bit of extra work than the normal moderator, because the assembly passed the overture creating a commission to write the letter on transgender surgeries and medical procedures for minors. So that was a little bit extra work. That commission did a fabulous job. I keep saying it. I get emails and notes and cards from people telling me how thankful they are for what I did and for the commission. And I say, just give them all the praise. I picked men that I thought would do a good job and were trustworthy, and they did an excellent job. So I had that. In January, the moderator chairs the Cooperative Ministries Committee meeting in Atlanta. That's not really a heavy lift. That's much easier than chairing the SJC or Overtures. So I've had that. And then just recently, I selected conveners for the committees of commissioners. We'll see, if the men I selected are willing to do it. And that's kind of an important job, because they don't always, but often they will end up being the chairman of those committees. And so you do that. I have been blessed to have some unofficial duties, though. I've been to several churches and several presbyteries, and I've got some more on my calendar in the next few months. I've been kind of doing a state of the PCA tour, so to speak, which I'm very glad to do, because I think the PCA is in a very good place. I'm very happy with the state of the PCA. We're not perfect. There's sin in our camp, just like every other camp. But I'm very glad with where we are, having stood for the gospel, having stood for the Reformed faith, more and more involvement in the work of the church by men at the local level, especially by ruling elders recently, not just at assembly, but in presbyteries as well. And so I've been able to, you sort of forget when you rack up good things. So like you forget that federal vision is gone in the PCA. You forget the great sexuality report that we put out. You forget, the fact that we're one of the few denominations that's growing. And so it's good to remind PCA folk about that, because, our tribe tends to enjoy complaining and doomsdaying. And I think, it's always good to take a hard look and to thank the Lord for the blessings he's given to us.
Yeah, I was looking at some numbers today, and the Southern Baptist Convention, which is much, much larger, obviously, than we are, in 1984, they were about 14 million. And we were, so I chose 84 because that gave time to get the RPCES in and the second wave churches that came in after, the PCUSA was formed. So we had 170,000 then. Now we have 400,000. The SBC had 14 million then and around 12 or 13 million now. So we've increased about 2.25 fold in the last that would be 40 years, and the SBC is actually shrinking. Now there are many reasons for that. Of course, I mean some of those. It's very easy for a Baptist church to become an independent church for their own. To become a. When Baptist churches become mega churches, they get too big for the Southern Baptist Convention. Yeah. Maybe. And when I was still a Southern Baptist more than 20 years ago, I would go to founders conferences, the Calvinistic guys, and I would hear things like we're many but we're not much, and we're 5 miles wide and a quarter inch deep. Now that's not always true, but you get the gist of it. I've heard that from LCMS Lutherans saying that their 1.2 million members or whatever is probably greatly inflated because they don't do church discipline. A lot of people just show up once a year. We don't have that issue. I mean, our people. It's when I came to my church, the most amazing thing was. There were probably 80% of the membership was there on any given Sunday, maybe 85%. And coming from the Southern Baptist world, that didn't compute. No. That was not normal. So what you say about growth is real. Now we're not doubling every 5 years. This is not an IPO business plan boom bust thing. We hope. But we are growing, and most haven't. And of course, a lot of our NAPARC brethren, because they worship through COVID and were faithful, they're growing too. But do you think we'll keep growing slowly?
I do. If you're familiar at all with Ryan Burge, and he's kind of the Christian statistician, and he does wonderful work. I subscribe to his Substack, and he actually was just on a podcast with Tom Rayner, who is, of course, the former president of Lifeway, or CEO of Lifeway, the Southern Baptists CE wing. And the underlying metrics for the Southern Baptists are not good. Our underlying metrics are good. You see this sometimes in baseball. A guy's got a high ERA, but they say, well, but he's just getting unlucky because, and then some nerd pulls out 75 stats about, barrel velocity and this and that and everything else. So the underlying metrics give you kind of a sense. The other thing that I think does not get enough airtime in our circles is our numbers are completely voluntarily reporting. So we are, by definition, underreported. The PCA is larger than our numbers. It's just a fact because everyone who reports is in the number and everyone who doesn't isn't. Now, I don't know what that means. Are we 20% bigger than numbers? 25, 10? It's hard to tell. Probably a lot of those churches are smaller churches that don't report. One of the things that I have tried to encourage folks is if you're in a small church or if you're in a church that doesn't want to be bothered with stats to the state clerk's office, you need to at least turn in your membership and attendance numbers. You don't need to put down the details of your budget or how many, people go to a small group or whatever, minute, because there's a lot of stats that are helpful. But it would be really helpful for the PCA to know how many members and how many attendees she really has. We're missing that. So I think, Brad, we are going to continue to grow. I think we live in a culture that is very hostile to the faith. And the way I describe it to my congregation is we live in a world that looks an awful lot like the world in the book of Acts, where there's a lot of war, a lot of rampant immorality, a lot of murder, a lot of lying, a lot of greed. There's a lot of ways in which the modern world, and not just America and not just the West, but you could say this about China and India as well, looks a lot like secular Rome and her compatriots, the Persian Empire, etc. And so, and last time I looked, the church did pretty well in that environment. It's difficult to be under strain and persecution and pressingness, but it also makes you stand out. And so people will wonder, why are you different? Why do you have hope? Why are you raising your children this way? Why are you encouraged and having children when everyone else says, oh, I don't even want to bring a child into this world? Why are you preparing for the future when everyone else says, I want to spend all my money today because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? So I think we're very well poised to go.
Well, that's encouraging, and of course, we always have problems, and as you said, we're better at talking about our problems and being sad sacks. And I'm not going to say that my own pastor calls me Eeyore, but maybe he does. So I can relate to that. But we're happy to hear some optimism. So when it comes to optimism, we're talking about numbers. What are you hearing about the attendance numbers in Richmond? Which is again, it's odd because you're on the Eastern Seaboard, which is easier for some people. You're in the South, but you're further from the heart of the South. And we had record numbers the 2 previous years, Birmingham and Memphis. But what are you hearing about numbers this year?
So in terms of ratio of where we are in terms of registrations as of current, which are not full registrations, I don't understand this, Brad, because, within 10 minutes of the registration email going out, I was signed up. So I don't wait about this, but a lot of folks do. They wait till toward the end. What I'm hearing is that we're on track to probably be the 3rd largest assembly ever, probably between 2,000 and 2,100. I think current registrations are maybe 14 or 1,500, something like that, which is already more than most assemblies a decade ago. And that's another reason for encouragement. And that is those higher numbers mean that, first of all, there's greater participation in the General Assembly. And secondly, they mean that the assembly looks more like the PCA. There's better representation from around the country, from big churches and small churches, teaching elders and ruling elders. It's not a small subset. And so I'm very encouraged about that, because I think that gives us healthier churches. It's not just about the way certain votes go at the assembly, but the more men are involved in the work of the church, the more they take that home to their congregations, and their congregations understand they're a part of the greater church. It means something to be Presbyterian. It's not just something on your sign outside. And so, at least from my congregation, they're very encouraged by these sorts of things. Every year that I have been here at Christ Church, which is now, this summer is my 18th year, I do a report when I come back from General Assembly, telling them how the assembly works and what happened and what we can pray for, and et cetera. And so I'm expecting another really strong year, which is good for the PCA. It's good for the AC's office because registration fees help keep everything afloat in what they do. And I think it's good for our witness to the watching world.
So we're also, relative to some of the other denominations, not other NAPARC denominations, but the Southern Baptist Convention, the Anglicans, obviously the Methodists, the Dutch Reformed sort of mainline churches, the CRC and the RCA, they all have controversy. Much of it's over, male-female sex issues, female pastors, that sort of thing. We don't have those issues, and we got past the revoice same-sex attraction issue, as far as we know. So we're sort of controversy-free, because I don't have church members coming to me and asking me about revoice or something else like I did in years past. So that's a change, right?
It certainly is. And I think it's a change for the better because it means we don't have some really potentially unhealthy things going on. But I also think it allows us to do the work of the church. I mean, there's no, drum banging overture this year before the assembly, but there are a lot of important issues that we're going to talk about, and we're going to, refine our book of church order and try to deal with some of these issues like witness eligibility and who can represent someone before a court and how the assembly will run. And, there's a lot of judicial type issues that are before us. And, I don't know if you look through the overtures list, Brad. This is a Greco free overture year. And so, and as I look at it here now, I don't want to make a statement until I look. It looks like this might be a Donahoe free overture year. There's no Pacific Northwest. I've got some overtures in my back pocket that I've been working on, and I'll probably come to the next assembly. But, just because there's not some huge controversy doesn't mean these things aren't important. And we need to be, I think, in that mode, Brad. Ruling elders and teaching elders need to understand that we go to assembly and we do this work because that's who we are. We are elders. We are called to the work of the church. We're not controversialists and, Twitterati. We're not just trying to deal in controversy. We are here to do the work of the church. And so, I think there'll be some interesting debates. There may even actually be longer debate than there were with many of the overtures last year because these are more nuanced. They're less controversial. They're less earth-shattering, and there may be more of a variety of opinions on some of these overtures.
Yeah, that makes sense. In fact, I was thinking about that. I'm going to be on the overtures committee, and I think there'll be 2 or 3, 4 overtures that don't seem like big deals that may be debated in there for a long time, because we're tuning, we're making slight adjustments, and sometimes that can be harder than just lopping something off, or
Right.
blowing something up.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's a very good point. So tell us about the different. I mean, are there 3 or 4 general categories of overtures, or 3 or 4 big issues? I mean, I know the abuse related issues are a big deal, and there are several overtures that have to do with that. But how would you describe the 2 or 3 big categories of requests? Now, remember, I'll remind everybody, there are 2 kinds of overtures. There are overtures that just ask the assembly to do something or make a statement, but then there are overtures that if they involve, and some of those are just if they're passed by 50% plus 1, they're enacted. But anything that would amend the Constitution, which is to say the BCO, That's a long process. It's got to
Right.
pass by a majority. It's got to pass the presbyteries by 2/3, and then pass by a simple majority again. So it's hard to do that. It takes a long time. But how would you, in a couple of minutes, generally describe the types of overtures we have, or do we just have the same range that we always have?
Well, I think we have the typical range. The category of kind of make a statement overtures is probably the smallest category this year. There's about a half dozen that deal with statements, about a matter, about gender, or about who's qualified to preach, or even about the constitutionality of preaching, and where that is. These are more statement issues than fine tuning of the Book of Church Order. Then we have it's interesting. This is really a year about process. So there are a whole bunch of overtures about the rules of discipline. Who can be a witness? Can you change venue in a trial? Can you appeal something during a case? How do you do an investigation? Who can be represented in a case of process? These are, very kind of almost inside baseball matters, but they're really important. Nobody cares about the rules of discipline until they get involved in a case. And then usually they call me and say, how do we not mess this up? So there's a bunch of them with that. Then there are even some other ones that are dealing with ordination and related issues to a man's credentials, about transfer exams and exit interviews that I think will be very enlightening to have debate on. And then there are, again, a large number, maybe about a half dozen, 7, that deal with process, about what agencies can do, how business gets before the assembly, where clarifications about where a membership of a teaching elder lies. And so none of them really appear to be something that is so that the average pew person would immediately have an opinion on. And so one of the things that I hope folks do is that they do some homework, because you can't just roll out of bed, open up your handbook on your iPad, and come up with a knowledgeable opinion. I'm in the middle now of working on my annual, I wouldn't call it recommendations. It's more my personal opinions on the matters before the assembly. I didn't do that last year because I was running for moderator and I didn't think that would be wise. And now it's interesting. I've gotten a whole bunch of emails this year saying, I don't know if I dropped off your list. I didn't get your document last year. Yes, it is coming out again this year, probably in a couple of weeks. And I know there are others.
It's not a secret. It's not a secret document.
No, it's I share it with. So I don't post it up on the web. Then maybe that's just a personal preference. But anyone who asks me for it, ordained or unordained, male or female, ruling or teaching elder, likely to vote with me or not, I'll send it to, because I want people to give thought about the matters before the assembly. Usually my friend David Coffin does one as well. And then there are often a few others that will do that. I would just encourage men who are going to assembly to get as many of those as you can, talk to other folks, and try to do some prep work in advance. One of the things that you can do that's kind of a gem, I don't know if people are aware of what a wonderful job Wayne Sparkman has done at the Historical Center. Wayne is a gem. He is a dear man, a gentleman, a godly man, and a scholar. So if you go to the PCA net of pages and you go to the AC and then you go to the Historical Center, there's a BCO page where you can go and look up any section of the BCO. And Wayne has gathered together all of the information, not just the current text, but previous texts of that chapter or paragraph, predecessor passages from the PCUS, for example, and then often commentary from Morton Smith and from F.P. Ramsey. And so you can see why we have what we have to get a better understanding of why it might need to be changed or why things are different. And that's all in one place. You can go and do this. It's excellent. And so the average person can just go and get involved in that. And then that will raise questions that they can go, talk to other guys in your presbytery. Have these conversations in your sessions. I always do that in my session. So my ruling elders are very aware of the issues. I don't tell them how to vote. I'm smart enough not to try to do that, but to try to spot the issues for them so that they're not wondering where we are, why we're doing what we're doing.
So the number of, it seemed a couple of months ago that we were, we might end up with 25 overtures, but we're going to be a near normal number. I know of a personal overture that's going to come up. There are, 30 something already. Yeah, so there's, we might reach 40 before it's all said and done. Maybe just a couple more.
Right.
But it's not a light year. And the range of them means that the Overtures Committee it's going to have their hands full. It's going to take the full 8 or 12 hours of our time to get through them. And
I agree.
Yeah, and I don't know how much reporting I'll be doing since I'm on the committee. I may just say this passed, this didn't, whatever. But I'm not going to be sharing my opinion, certainly. And I guess I was on Overtures 2 or 3 years ago because I sat next to you at one of the times that I was on Overtures. So I wanted to be where the action was, and you always sit right next to a microphone to save
That's
steps.
True.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got to plan that again this year. Last year, I didn't have to worry so much about being at a microphone, but one of the first things I do when we show up at assembly Monday morning is I go as they're setting up and I look and scout out where I want to sit. And I need to be within, bouncing range of a microphone. And I like to be about midway back because I don't want to be up in front and have to look back and see folks. Because as you may know, Brad, from being a veteran, I will speak occasionally to the substance of a matter, but I'm almost always making a motion, making a point of order, trying to keep us moving along. And you don't want to have to walk far to a mic to get to do that.
No, that's, the image I have now is of an NBA player. He comes to a new arena and he's checking out the rims, he's warming up. So you do that too.
And I'm very glad that I'm on Overtures this year. I haven't been the last 2 years. And especially 2 years ago, when I wasn't preparing potentially to be moderator, I was in the back and I tweeted out, I felt a little bit like Tom Brady after he retired and had to watch the game and couldn't participate. I'm glad to be back in the mix again this year.
Does that mean we get a 3-hour roast of you coming up if, to complete the Tom Brady analogy?
Listen, Resby, there are not a lot of guys in the PCA that have memes made of them and stickers made of them that some of our guys pass out. There's Jovial Fred and Stern Fred. You've probably seen those.
Indeed.
So I've been on a year-long roast.
I love it.
Well, and our friend Stephen Watson does these graphics, and he's done 3 of you, and there are only 2 of me. So it wouldn't be right for me to have more than you. And yeah. So you are on Overtures. I didn't remember that. It was,
Yes.
but that, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, you'll be doing a lot of hours of prep and analysis, and we'll benefit from that. What about the whole? I mean, a lot of these overtures have to do with implications and consequences of the abuse report, and some of them request the use of outside services and people and investigators. That may seem like a good idea to some people, and you may think it's a good idea. I usually don't, because I just think it's a violation of our process where the church courts are competent to do their own business and take care of themselves. But I might argue against something and say it's unpresbyterian.
Right.
But tell the listeners what Presbyterian is, though, in this sense. I mean, the competency of the courts of the church. Of course, some people say, "Well, you've proven you're incompetent," but that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about our sphere and the prerogatives of the officers of the church.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be, as a church, very careful how we handle allegations of abuse. And by that, I mean, we ought not to presume that we have expertise we don't have. So one of my standard statements on this, and I've talked with brothers who were on the DASA committee, and I think I can say in the main they agree with me, is that when a church or a pastor or an elder hears about allegations, serious allegations of abuse, the very first thing they should do is report it to the authorities. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not do an investigation. Report it to the authorities, because it's a civil magistrate issue. And the problem is, we often in the church have good intentions, but we do things like we gather all of the victims together in a room and we ask them to share their story, which means you just contaminated a witness pool and made the DA's job very hard. We try to do investigations and we miss evidence or we ask the wrong questions. I always tell churches to kind of put discipline on hold, let the civil magistrate deal with matters, and then deal with discipline afterwards, because your job's actually made easier if the civil magistrate has proved his case. And if he hasn't, then maybe there's not much to it, because if they couldn't prove it, et cetera. So I think we need to be very careful about that, about thinking that it has to happen in the church immediately and primarily. I think we need to let the civil magistrate deal with these things first. And I think the other thing we need to realize is we are a spiritual body that deals with issues of sin and repentance. And that affects how we do things. I'll just say something very clearly. A person could commit a very heinous sin, murder, and they could repent of that sin. And the church could hear that and see it as genuine repentance and faith in Christ. That doesn't give you a get out of jail free card, right? And so we have to understand that there's still justice under the civil sphere in doing that. So I think we ought not to try to model ourselves after the civil courts, because they have resources we don't have. They have expertise that we don't have. The average pastor never sees cases like this. The average, DA or ADA in these kinds of cases, they may see dozens, hundreds in their career, and they know how these things work. And I can tell you this, Brad, because I get calls from all around the PCA, and they go something like this. This is what happened. I never thought something like this would happen. I have no idea what to do. What should I do? It's almost always a case of first impression, which I guess on one sense is encouraging, because if you were a pastor and you said, well, this is my 10th child abuse case in my congregation, that would not be exactly something to be proud of. It would be a great challenge. So we ought not to think that we have that kind of expertise. And I think that's a theme that goes through the DASA report, that we need to make sure that the authorities are informed, and let them even take the lead in that.
Well, let me ask you a controversial question. Some people would say there's an epidemic of child abuse, or, there's sort of three kinds of abuse we hear about. We hear about marital abuse, where a church officer or church member, husband and wife have an issue. And, we know in years past, especially in certain types of churches, they would just still say, no, the woman needs to just submit, take it.
Right.
We know that's terrible advice. And then there's the sexual abuse of children, which usually, most people don't know this, it's usually older children on younger children. I mean, that's generally what happens. And then there's the sexual abuse of adults on children. There's kind of the superior, inferior, power differential sexual abuse that happens, and then there's what's called, this is a very modern term and it doesn't have a definition, spiritual abuse, which could mean you told me something I didn't like and it hurt my feelings.
Right.
You can't. I don't see how to legislate that hardly at all. But do you think there's an epidemic of abuse? Some people would say that. I don't believe that's a fair statement. It's out there because it's in the society. It's out there because 100% of our church members are totally depraved, whether they're converted or not. The seeds are all there for we know we're all liable to every sin that anyone can think of. But do you think there's an epidemic of abuse, and do you think that's a helpful term?
Well, I would say, and this is just kind of an impression I have. I don't have data to back it up, but I would say that we're not seeing a new epidemic of abuse as much as we are seeing the results of an explosion in the last 20 years of communication. Things that happened 100 years ago in a small town in Alabama or New York or Maine would not have been known an hour from where it happened, let alone across the country. Now we get reporting on everything, not just this, on everything. Think about how different, the reporting on wars has been in the last 50 years. In World War II, we would hear about D-Day weeks later. And then, of course, you have the Gulf War, where you have embedded reporters and you're getting kind of fog of war, sort of real time. Now you've got people sending video over Twitter of a battlefield as it's happening. I think that's true in this area too. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If it's true, the problem is when it's a false accusation, it flies just as fast. But I don't think we're seeing, even though I think in the main, in the public view of our culture, it's certainly much more sexualized. It's certainly much less restrained publicly. I think that's what all that is. I don't think it means that people in the 40s and 50s were all straight-laced and everyone was obeying the seventh commandment and nobody was doing anything wrong and society was perfect. I think we just had a lot of cover-ups and a lot of lack of information. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't take these things seriously, but I think we also shouldn't be afraid that the very fabric of society is falling apart.
I think some. I don't know if they're using it cynically. I'm not going to say that they are because I don't know that to be true. But there are currents which have to do with we are a complementarian denomination. We do have male-only officers. Some people think the fix is to have female officers or female quasi-officers or non-ordained people involved with at every level. of church government. That's one of those things where I say my objection to it is it's not Presbyterian anymore. Some people think that our system is flawed, and it's fatally flawed. So everything needs to change, and that's the cult. We know the cultural currents and the denominational and Christian currents are moving towards egalitarianism. We've got Rick Warren with the female preachers. We've got the issue in the Southern Baptist Convention. We've got people leaving the PCA to join the EPC and ECO, who say that, wow, it just hit me one day. I was wrong. We were wrong on this, male-only elder issue. So my convictions have changed, and voila, I'm now in one of what I call sort of the midline churches. So, and AGNA, the Anglicans, a big range of roles there. And I think the center of evangelicalism has moved left. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So we're going to get pulled by that one way or another. We seem to be doing well in that area, but what do you see coming in that respect?
Well, I think we can't buy into the view, Brad, that our system of government is fatally flawed. And this is where the Presbyterian, the polity seminary professor in me comes forward. Because we know from the scriptures that God hates abuse. He hates immorality. He judges the wicked. And he calls upon the rulers to mete out justice to those who oppress the vulnerable. I mean, that's very clear. I didn't need a DASA report to tell me that. Now, I think the DASA report did good work in that area, but that's plain from the scriptures. This same God has ordained that the elders of the church and the deacons of the church are to be men. 1 Timothy, Titus. I don't think God was asleep at the switch. I don't think God missed an opportunity. And so he knows the wickedness of the hearts of men and women and children. And he has determined in his infinite wisdom, far more than I could ever hope to imagine, how the church should be governed and what it should do and how it should reflect his will and law. I mean, that's part of the whole purpose of church discipline. Is it's not just to reclaim the sinner. It's not just for the purity of the church. It's to reflect the glory of God and the holiness of God. And so I don't think we need to change our system to fix this. I mean, this is a problem, but it's a human problem. So the dirty secret that most people don't know or are aware of is the real hotbed of abuse is in the public school system. That's where most abuse takes place. And that is a mixed gender system and a mixed gender authority system. Now, I'm not trying to, beat on principals and teachers. I'm just saying it's a problem society-wide. And I don't think there's a magic fix. You sprinkle in a few female elders and everything will be better. I do think there is some wisdom in church leaders and elders listening to women. I say this to young pastors all the time. If you're a young pastor and you don't ask your wife her opinion and listen to her and value it, you're an idiot. Because she knows you best. She can give you a perspective that you don't always have, and it's valuable. And that's true also of women who are members in a church. We should listen. We should hear, especially if, a woman comes up to a pastor and says, Pastor, I've got a funny feeling about this because my friend, she wasn't acting like this before, and she did this, and she did that, and she said this, and I think something's going on there, and you need to be praying about it, and you need to maybe talk to her or get someone involved. I think it's wise to follow up on things like that. But that doesn't require us to, make sure that 45% of the General Assembly is female, which is actually where a lot of these things go. It's not just, changing egalitarian. It's literally going toward a quota system and toward being illegitimate unless, certain opinions are voiced, et cetera. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to watch any of the recent United Methodist gathering. I mean, it was just outrageous, to say the least.
Yeah.
My favorite moment from that, I shouldn't say my favorite moment, but the most humorous moment was when they broke up I don't know what they call it. It's not a general assembly, to do a conga line of Love Train. They were singing the old Soul Train act, people all over the world, join hands. And they were doing a conga line. Forgive me, but I'll take Robert's Rules over that.
Yeah, but I loved that Coke commercial when they did that.
I did see that, and it's almost like they've modeled their convention or whatever I forget it. They call it the General Conference or something, and it would remind you of a state university faculty senate.
Yes.
That's kind of the ethos, or a diversity seminar for a government, if you're a government employee,
Right.
or if you're a lawyer, you have to go through all those things too. I know, and most people know you were a lawyer before you repented, and most people know that. So, and if you look at the PCUSA, most PCUSA church staffs are 80 to 90% female now. And there are probably twice as many female elders, I don't know about pastors, but ruling elders in the PCUSA. And what becomes allowable almost every time soon becomes mandated. The changes in the main line happened slowly, and they became concessions, then they became minority positions, and then they became required at some point.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about with quotas. We don't want to get into that. We don't model ourselves after secular government or institutions or nonprofit organizations or colleges or any of that stuff. But that's the world a lot of people live in, and they're quite comfortable with it.
Yes.
So that's one of the big. So do you think? I said that GA kind of snuck up on us. I think this 2024 election year is sort of sneaking up on us as well. A quiet start. Of course, we've only got a month till General Assembly, but secular politics and everything associated with that, and protest and all that, they can't help but have some effect. I think. Well, it'd be great if they didn't. It'd be great if we didn't see any evidence of anything like that at General Assembly. Like the closing. If the church really was a refuge and really was different, as Machen speaks about in the last page of Christianity and Liberalism,
Right.
I hope that's what we want. We want to be different and to be a refuge and not blown about by every wind of doctrine, but every wind of culture and politics and whatever.
Right.
But anyway, we'll see on that. We don't have, I don't think, we don't have any really political overtures this year, do we? I don't think there are any.
No, I don't see any. And, it's interesting. To get back to my optimism rant, one of the things that's been really, in my mind, good is the last couple of years, the level of debate has been much more civil, much more intelligent, much more well-crafted than in previous years. One of the things I said as I moderated that made my job so much easier was, the debate was, even on the couple of overtures that were really debated pretty intently, there was not this kind of mudslinging and innuendo and such, which really has become a mark of our politics. I'm old enough to remember when political campaigns, were maybe dirty, but they weren't dirty and rotten. And so I think that's another good witness that we have to the world, that if we can debate these issues that are important issues. So, one of the things I think we're going to debate pretty intently is who can be a witness in an ecclesiastical trial. And I'm hopeful that will be a good debate, that it'll be helpful, that there won't be motives assigned, to the other side, so to speak, on each side of that issue. And so when the world sees this, that can't help, I think, but have an effect. And that's the other thing about the communication. The world can see this. They don't have to even be watching the week of assembly. It's up online all year, and people write articles. And so what we do is going to be seen, in various corners throughout the country. So I'm hopeful that we will manage ourselves and our debate in a way that is Christ-like and brings us to good decisions.
Well, we do hope that, and but sometimes you're surprised. You never know what's going to spark debate. There were some concerns last year that there might be, some not outside protesters due to some of the LGBT issues,
right?
Things like that. There was extra security. I don't get the feeling that that's in play this year.
I haven't heard anything. I know there was concern, probably heightened because it was the 50th, but I know at least because of the overture on transgenderism, there was some thought that maybe there might be some protests that might even carry themselves and try to interrupt into the assembly. I don't know. I hope not, because that would be a shame. We've just been watching video. I feel so bad for people who are graduating from college this year, because, these folks lost their 2020 high school graduation to COVID. And now at one of my alma maters, University of Michigan, yes, Brad, nobody has it better than us. The University of Michigan, their graduation was interrupted, by protesters. So you've got a dozen people ruining, a very special day for tens of thousands. And I hope we don't see anything like that. I trust the AC to be prepared and to let the convention center know, what concerns we might have. But I don't see that there's the same level of concern as last year.
All right. So we don't want to keep you all night. We're not going to go through overtures in detail. We'll have a show or two about that. We're going to have the Polity boys, as I call them, the Polity Matters podcast guys on, maybe as soon as next week, to talk about to get into the grain on some of these things. But I think it'd be helpful if you could give some. Well, every year they're first-time commissioners. What sort of guidance would you give to new commissioners? How to prepare, how to have a good assembly. I think you're as good as anyone to give that advice. So I'm sure you have some things to say about that.
Yeah. So I think, first, generally speaking, do your homework. Whether it's you're printing out and having a copy of my recommendations, or you prepare one of your own, just so you have the overtures with all the numbers and what's going on, so you keep track of where things are. Try to get a copy of the commissioner's, handbook in advance. This is really kind of technical, but it's a huge help. The more you can download the materials to an iPad or, a tablet or a phone or a Kindle in advance, the better off you are. If you can, you will be well served to have cellular service at the assembly. So whether that is you have an iPad like I do that has cell service, or you learn in advance how to hotspot your phone to your iPad, so you're not trying to fight the network with everyone else trying to download things. That is a big advantage. I will also say, again, this is kind of technical. If you have a tablet, have multiple applications that will allow you to read documents. So like you might have the file share app. You might have a notes app that you can put a PDF in, or iBooks, or any number of things like that. Because then what you can do is you can have multiple reports open on multiple apps, and you can flip back and forth very quickly, which otherwise would be hard to scroll hundreds of pages, in order to do that. I think, that's good. Make sure to stay hydrated, have water, make sure you get yourself some coffee. You've got those sorts of things.
It's not free. And
No.
even the water crocs are sponsored by someone.
That's correct. That's correct.
Finish your drinks, schedule your blank.
No.
I didn't say it. Other people might have said it. I didn't say it.
If you can, when you're getting to the assembly, talk to the folks who are around you. Find out where they're from. It's a good way to get to know other elders. Find out if this is their first assembly or their 21st assembly. And then, ask them, okay, what's coming up next? Why are we doing this? So you can try to be understanding what's coming up in advance, so you're not caught, by surprise. There are certain times in the agenda that are much more controversial than others. Obviously, overtures, the review of Presbytery records report, the elections under the nominating committee report. I think there'll be a lot of interest in the RUF report this year. I think what we're going to see in the affiliation agreement, a lot of commissioners are going to be happy about. I know it's going to come from the Committee of Commissioners, because I re-looked at the video afterwards. I think it was 9 times I answered the exact same question. How will the affiliation agreement come before us next year? And I said, through the Committee of Commissioners and a recommendation. I think RUF has done some good work listening. I had a hand in helping to draft some changes to their proposal that I was happy with. So, there are other times where you might be interested, but there may not be controversy. You may be interested to hear about what's going on at Covenant College or in discipleship ministries for your church, but there aren't going to be controversial votes you need to do. Now, even us veterans can be surprised, because I have to tell you, I did not have on my General Assembly bingo card PCA Foundation debate of 60 minutes. I did not have that. I don't think the foundation debate took 60 minutes the previous 20 assemblies I was at. So you never know. There could be something controversial to come out of one of the other committees of commissioners. So you've got to be ready and be able to do that.
Yeah, a warning I would have for people is that, everyone needs to be there at the opening session, because that's when we ratify the PCO amendments that have been approved by presbyteries. And we've had a few of those shot down. I think people were just kind of caught flat-footed. So you want to be there and vote for that, and you want to be sure you're voting, that you know what you're voting for.
Yes. Really, 3 important things right off the bat, Brad. You got the election of the moderator. You want to be there for that. You've got the final step in the BCO amendments, which this year is especially important because I think every amendment passed with like 90% plus presbyteries. You can ask Spreadberg what the exact percentages are next week. And then the third thing is the current year's rules of assembly operations overtures will also come up right away, because that's when we can get the supermajority of delegates, commissioners, in the hall. So there's actually a lot of fairly important stuff in the first hour or so of business.
Yeah, and when overtures comes up, there'll be, let's just say there's 30 overtures. 20 of them are assumedly not that controversial. And if you want if you want the assembly to vote on one of those, and you have to ask that it be pulled out of the omnibus recommendation, because the overtures committee will come with a slate. In 8 or 10 will be pulled out. But if you care about an issue, if you blink, it's done.
That's right.
And I mean, our moderators do a good job of trying to inform everybody, but nobody's coddled at General Assembly. It can be rapid fire action, and the thing you care about may be over before you know it.
That's exactly right. Now, I tried, and I got some good feedback on this, to make sure the assembly knew what was before it. I tried to explain what we were voting on, which way you might want to vote, depending on, because sometimes we get these, if you're voting yes to a negative recommendation, you're actually voting against it, these sorts of things. But I never stopped and said, okay, everybody pay attention. This is really important. No, you got to know what's important to you. And so that means preparation and taking notes, and to make sure that it doesn't pass you by, because it will go right by you.
Yeah, that's why you've got to go about 3 or 4 years in a row to get any sort of comfort level with the process. And I think you've said that, and other people have said it as well.
Yeah.
Most people say if it's your first or second General Assembly, you probably shouldn't go to the microphone. There are some people who've been in the Assembly 30 years who probably shouldn't go to the microphone, but it's good to listen before you speak. But someone has to speak, and someone has to take initiative sometimes, and so that's. But I think one of the things you probably noted it as well as our ruling elder participation has increased from around 20% to 30% or more. The quality, there are a lot of ruling elders making quality contributions to debate in all the committees and on the floor, and that's the wisdom of the way we read the Bible, to see that there are a parity of elders. It's borne out in our assembly. I think it's right there in front of you. You can see it.
That's right.
And it's made a difference. I should say this, because the GRN event has had to be moved to Wednesday night. More and the Ruling Elder Network will have an event Wednesday night, kind of a late event with kind of drinks and just a fellowship time, a porch to burn tobacco products on. So contact me if you haven't heard about that, and hopefully, Fred, you can drop by too. But we're going to make you pay for it. So.
Well,
you got to register.
I'm the token teaching elder at a lot of these ruling elder events, because I used to be a ruling elder, but
yeah, you're allowed.
I enjoy spending time, and I would especially encourage the ruling elders, if you want to participate, 2 things will be your friend. Number 1, jot notes of what you want to say on a piece of paper or your phone, so that you're not just standing up and you lose track of what you want to say. And number 2, the 3 B's. Be brief, brother.
That's better than keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, my favorite speech at last year's assembly, I don't know if you remember this, Brad. There was a brother from Canada who was way in the back, and I called on him and I said, "I'm going to call on you, sir, but just realize there's 10 seconds left in this topic." And he got his whole speech in the 10 seconds and sat down. And so a good 1 to 2 minute speech will actually, I think, have more effect than a bad 10-minute speech.
No doubt. I mean, we see the 4 letters TLDR, too long, didn't read. It could be, but certainly speeches can do more harm than good for the cause that they espouse. So brevity, the soul of wit, and wit in Shakespeare's time meant intelligence, not being funny. Although, most of the humor that occurs on the floor is kind of accidental and incidental. No one's doing material, doing a routine. But when you were proved wrong last year, that was one of the funniest moments.
I'm never going to live that down. I think I've made Bob Mattis his whole life. Now, I do want to say this, because I listened to George Sayers' podcast, in which he didn't have me on. He just had Bob on, and it was a soliloquy about how Bob defeated me. But when I made my initial ruling, I was correct. And then I got distracted, and then I said the opposite, which was completely incorrect. I'm owning up to it. I was wrong.
So what you're saying is, when you were arguing with Bob, it was kind of like arguing with your wife.
I don't want to No, I'm not going to put my wife in the same category there. I will say, though, that I think the best picture that we'll ever have from assembly is when I said that Bob was right, the whole hand over the mouth. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll never forget it. So, well, is there anything else you want to share? And I should say that probably the next 3 shows will be about the General Assembly. We'll try to cram as much content in there as we can. Try to do a couple of shows from the assembly. I'm on Overtures, which is a long day. It may be challenging to get shows done. We don't know how the Wi-Fi will be there. And my wife's going. She doesn't like to stay up late, so I'm going to have to find someone else's room to record in, or I'm going to be in big trouble.
The hallway sessions.
So we're gonna do our best. But anything else you want to say? Any other encouragement you want to give?
Just really looking forward to being there. I'm really looking forward to the assembly, to the committee work, to the GRN event, to the RTS lunch, to all of the things that are involved there. I love it. This is, I think, assembly number 22 for me. My wife will be with me as well. She's probably been to 13 or 14. So she's got her whole group of ladies that she knows from assembly that she'll deal with. We part ways in the morning and we come back together in the evening and relax. And I would just say, if especially if there are some ruling elders who are there for the first time or the second time, and you see me, flag me down. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to hear your story. It's a good opportunity to meet other folks. I'll even let you buy me a coffee. But
will you make them an offer that they can't refuse? That's not what I want.
That's right. That's right. Someday, Brad, and that day may never come. I may ask them for a favor. No, but that's one of the great things about assembly. There's a lot of problems that comes with our assembly being the size it is as opposed to the OPC assembly. But one of the benefits is getting to meet a lot of guys in the church and a lot of ladies in the church. And so I would love to meet more and get to know you. So if you see me, flag me down. I'd love to have a conversation.
All right. Very good. We'll encourage everyone to do that. And again, I always tell people this, the PCA seems much smaller than it is because, even with 2,000 people at General Assembly, you sort of feel like almost everyone or a shocking percentage thereof. So, and we've had listeners and friends who are just PCA church members who've driven across the country to attend General Assembly, and there's always a few of those. So be nice to your fellow attendees and enjoy the week, but there's work, plenty of work too. I mean, it took me about 2 assemblies ago was quite stressful for me. And I think it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to recover. I just didn't have any emotional energy at all, and that had never happened to me before. So we'll see. We'll see what this year holds. Well, Resby, did you have any parting questions for Fred, or did you just want to thank our listeners and Fred for being with us?
One piece of technological advice: if you have an iPad new enough, you can actually open multiple apps on the same screen at once. So you could have multiple open to research at the same time. Made use of that quite a number of times. Not at General Assembly, of course, to quote paraphrase Mr. Sobchak. But my encouragement, we mentioned, folks who've driven in or may not be ordained or just Presbyterian lay people. The few assemblies that I've attended, that was always like an overwhelming appreciation for people coming to actually view the legislative workings of the church at that level. Like a concerned lay person is generally an informed lay person, and that's support that elders and the churches need to hear, to know that these aren't just while important, that they're not just in the abstract, that these do, that it's something that gets all the way down to every single member of these churches, whether or not they ever really come in contact with it, to know that they're being deliberated and debated with, as much salt and pepper and maybe a little vinegar here and there as they require. That's probably the most serious thing I've ever said on the show, but I think I say it every year. So if you're within driving distance and you want to go. It's free. I mean, what else are you going to do?
You got to pay for parking, though.
That's true. Richmond, I mean, the former Escondido County resident in me, there is a Stone Brewery in Richmond. They have a restaurant there, so maybe make a couple tourist stops. Schedule that accordingly, however you want to do it. But thank you, Fred. Thank you, Chortles, as always, for moderating our discussion. This is, in the spirit of efficiency and breaking records, this is probably the fastest we've ever gotten out of a preview show about General Assembly as well. So, good job, us. We're Presbycast. Don't be an Erdman.
What's wrong with you people?